Bonjour et bienvenue d'être ici. C'est les choses, ce n'est pas un secret, mais ce n'est pas mentionné beaucoup. This is Environment Week in Canada, created by law and statute. That June 1st to 7th is Canada's Environment Week. I remember the old days when lefty greenies like Brian Mulroney made sure that every single day of Environment Week included a new announcement of something good for the planet and for Canada. Malheureusement, c'est le temps vraiment passé, et maintenant, c'est 2026. So today I just wanted to address some of the things that are lingering. On June 7th, the consultation period on the two discussion documents issued May 8th will come to a close. Those two discussion documents, getting major projects built and strengthening our Canadian economy through trade and transportation, contain, if they were implemented in legislation, major rollbacks on environmental assessment, major bulldozers through endangered species habitat and endangered species law. They also contain some of the most peculiar language I've ever seen in terms of respecting Indigenous rights. So much of what's in these discussion documents is prima facie unacceptable and so contrary to anything that was in the Liberal election platform. On May 11th or 12th, I wrote to Ministers Steve McKinnon and Dominic LeBlanc, who co-signed these discussion documents, to say, look, your discussion documents of May 8th require a deadline for people filing their responses by June 7th. As Parliament doesn't sit again until May 25th, I please request for all members of Parliament from all parties an opportunity to have a deep briefing where questions can be answered about the intent of these discussion papers and what the language means. So I'm sad to report here on June 3rd that not only has there been no briefing, I haven't had a response to my letter, which I'd have to say is quite unusual. Usually if I'd write to Minister McKinnon or Minister LeBlanc, I would at least get a note saying, we're considering your request. So I have to conclude that as I have to file my response to these consultation documents by Monday, I'm not going to get a briefing. So I think my advice to the government ought to be clear and public. Both discussion documents should be completely withdrawn and nothing proposed should ever be brought forward in legislation. I would now add to that they should withdraw Bill C-22 because having attempted to come up with amendments to C-22, the spyware bill, if we could call it, I conclude that I don't think it can be salvaged and it would be better if the government just withdrew it. At the same time, I wanted to draw attention to something really significant that appeared in today's Globe and Mail. Canada's former ambassador for climate change, Patricia Fuller, who's been a consummate civil servant. She's not been an activist, ever. I've never heard her say anything like this, having attended quite a number of conferences with the parties with her leading the delegation. She co-authored with the director of Pembina and another one of the think tank groups this headline: the world is moving off fossil fuels and Canada continues to live in the past. It's in today's Globe and Mail. What they noted was that of all the developments that are happening with the sharp drop in reliance on fossil fuels and the shift to renewable energy that's happening in, and they listed Vietnam, Egypt, obviously the European Union, but also countries as disparate as Australia, New Zealand, Bangladesh, the Netherlands. And this quote from the government of South Korea: our future will be at serious risk if we continue to rely on fossil fuels. Again, the government's discussion document on getting major projects built. Many of those major projects that have been referred to the Major Projects Office depend on a future market for fossil fuels, which simply isn't going to be there. So it's not just an environment versus economy. This is economy versus economy. C'est vraiment clair maintenant que l'avenir, ce n'est pas durable de façon économique ni écologique avec la dépendance sur l'énergie fossile. L'énergie fossile est énergie de le passé, c'est pas maintenant, c'est pas dans l'avenir. pas seulement pour l'environnement ni pour le climat, mais c'est clair que le prix d'énergie renouvelable et la technologie est vraiment meilleur de tous les autres. And so the cheapest electricity you can get is also the cleanest, is also available, rolls out quickly and easily. And that's solar and wind technologies. It's not LNG. One of the examples cited in the article I mentioned in today's Globe and Mail was the government of Vietnam canceling an LNG project because they say there's no future in LNG. We wouldn't do it. Why would we? So here we are again. It's Canada's Environment Week, Happy Environment Week, and the hope I have in our future rests in our banker prime minister discovering what's happening economically around the world and aligning Canada's policies with the direction that investment is going so that we can also have half a prayer of holding on to a livable climate. Happy to answer any questions.
Do you believe the exit of environmentalists like Stephen Guilbeault and Jonathan Wilkinson from cabinet is helpful to the Liberal strategy of bringing down independent sentiment in Alberta?
Je sais pas. No, je pense que non. No, the idea that Liberals can appeal, this is not, I'm not the first person to point this out. Liberals have forever fallen for the idea that they can win votes in Alberta by sacrificing the climate. This started when, well, at least in my memory, when 1993, when Jean Chrétien dumped the environment chapter from the Liberal Red Book because Anne McClellan had just won an Edmonton riding by, I think, 14 votes. Her nickname was Landslide Annie. They started throwing billions of dollars at the oil sands at a time when the oil sands, les sables bitumineux, ce n'est pas entreprise qui marche dans l'époque quand Jean Chrétien a donné les fonds, les subventions pour l'énergie fossile dans les sables bitumineux il y a presque 30 ans. Alors, continually, Liberals think that if they sacrifice climate, they'll win seats in Alberta. It's delusional, but they continue to think it. Ever since Pierre Trudeau brought in the national energy policy, Albertans have a long memory, and they don't believe Liberals. So the Liberals can keep trying. I think what's important is to hold the country together by showing mutual respect, but selling out the climate in the hopes that Daniel Smith, who promises national unity out one side of her mouth and offers a referendum out the other, it seems to me a losing gambit.
The environmental groups, of course, this morning had their press conference, and afterwards on his way in, the Prime Minister stopped for me. And so I asked him, is the government throwing away its environmental protection measures? And he said, absolutely not, and pointed to the nature strategy. I guess in your view, pointing to the nature strategy, is that sufficient? Is it good enough? If not,
it's laughable. A lot of the environmental groups that were initially thrilled with the nature strategy, and I was certainly relieved to see $2.8 billion towards the nature strategy. A lot of the nature groups, I shouldn't name people because then they may not want to be quoted, but they were initially very pleased. The nature strategy by itself is less than was promised. Nothing makes up for turning your back on the climate measures that were in place on March 9th when Mark Carney became Prime Minister, that are now gone. We are increasing emissions, not reducing them, and we remain the country within the G7 with the worst climate record, and that includes the United States.
Do you have any reaction? Yeah, go ahead. Last week at Environment Committee, Molly Johnson, the DM of ECCC, was there, and they faced a lot of questions with regards to whether the government is doing modelling before or after these policy changes. And Ms. Johnson, to the effect, has said that we have a lot of work to do, suggesting that the government hasn't been doing these calculations before implementing policy changes. What does that tell you with regards to the government's direction?
Well, I mean, we knew from the Commissioner for Environment and Sustainable Development in every report issued over the last couple of years that Canada was a long way from achieving the targets which are legally binding under the Paris Agreement. By the way, net zero by 2050 isn't a target under the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement targets are for 2030 to 2035, reducing, depending on how you look at the targets, between 40% below 2005 levels or 45% below 2005 levels. Any target that's pushed out to 2050 meets with the approval of the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, and I put to you, I think that's why they chose it, because they're not going to get much pushback from the industry if the target is so far in the future that people think they don't have to pay attention to it till 2045. It's now 2026. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change said to hold to the Paris commitment of trying to hold to 1.5 degrees Celsius, we needed deep cuts in emissions, and we needed them I'll quote the IPCC assessment report from April 4th, 2022, when they said, deep reductions are needed, quote, at the latest before 2025, close quote. So I'm concerned about the science, atmospheric chemistry, atmospheric physics. They're not like the reality of the climate crisis doesn't negotiate with politicians or humanity at all. But we have an obligation to control our own conduct, to move off fossil fuels as quickly as possible and plant more forests. That was another thing that got canceled, of course, was tree planting. We need to increase forest cover dramatically and reduce fossil fuel use dramatically, not cold turkey tomorrow, but on a pathway to move off fossil fuels as quickly as possible.
Off topic, but did you have any reaction to the federal government ordering the CRTC to review the online streaming rules? I'm curious what you made of that.
I think I think the online streaming rules come from an independent arm's length CRTC, and it's inappropriate for cabinet to intervene. It's actually, I think, potentially illegal.
How are you hoping to capitalize on the Liberal voters who still do care about the climate? You have more time for the next election now that the government has a majority. How are you in the Green Party hoping to gain and bring those people over to the Green Party from the Liberals who feel that they don't care about the climate anymore?
Let me change your verb. I don't want to capitalize on planetary doom. I want to mobilize those voters who feel let down by the people they voted for to press them quickly. There are a lot of concern, as some of the comments from Stephen Guilbeault suggests, there are a lot of backbencher Liberals who are deeply unhappy, and I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt that they're not just worried about losing their own seats. They actually have children. So I would like to hope that the backbencher Liberals who can see and who understand climate science and can see that what's happening now is unforgivable, and there's still time to reverse it. It's not going to reverse by appealing to anyone to change their minds, but if the voters who voted Liberal because they wanted climate action were to contact the Liberal MPs they voted for, to write letters to the editor, to write a letter that starts, I voted Liberal because I believed in you, I'm never voting Liberal ever again, will help to move government policy. I've heard through the grapevine that and thank you, I shouldn't thank reporters, but the Althea Raj piece in the Toronto Star that explained how the discussion document and the proposed changes to the Species at Risk Act could lead to the extinction, specifically carved out and designed to allow for the extinction of the southern resident killer whales, is causing insiders in the government to rethink the legislation they were going to bring forward. That's why I'm calling for both discussion documents to be shredded and not to pursue a path for further destruction of the precautionary principle. We've already seen Bill C-30 pass, which says we're now going to allow toxic pesticides that are too dangerous to be used, according to the minister, to be overruled by cabinet. That's gone through second reading, so it's now a committee. It isn't law yet, but it's in committee. There was nothing in the Liberal platform, nor in the November 4th budget, to lead anyone to suppose that this government was going to move fast to get rid of pesticide regulations. And I hear Conservative members of Parliament in the House reading petitions concerned that the government has cancelled the agricultural research project in Swift Current, Saskatchewan, which was a multi-year project to demonstrate the regenerative aspects of organic agriculture. So these are things that aren't making the front pages, but they're trickling through communities. So, yeah, of course, Greens will elect more MPs in the next election, but if that was my goal, or any Greens, we're here on principle for what matters to improve the quality of life for Canadians. We committed to social justice. We're not just an environment party. We're committed to peace and nonviolence. We're committed, obviously, to ecological sustainability. We're not seeing this government pursue those goals. So the place to go is to the voters, to say, please, let them know how you feel. Because right now, actuellement, je pense que l'essence qu'il n'y a pas un grand proportion des Canadiens et Canadiennes qui sont concernants avec le changement climatique. Il n'y a pas les citoyens qui pensent que le changement climatique est un enjeu primordial pour eux. I know that many, many Canadians, probably the majority, are very, very concerned about the climate crisis. They've been touched by it, and they don't want to have another heat dome that kills hundreds of people in 4 days, or windstorms that pick up kids' toy castles in LaSalle. They don't want to have another Hurricane Fiona. They don't want to see forest fires raging. We're at the beginning of a summer of a El Nino year with climate change rampant. The Canadians care about climate. We just have to make sure that PMO understands that. Merci beaucoup. Merci.